I never expected such public humiliation at my grandson Jake's college graduation dinner. There we were in that elegant restaurant when my daughter-in-law Amanda suddenly stood up and announced to everyone, "You embarrass me. I'm disgusted by you." Her voice carried across the room, silencing conversations at nearby tables. All eyes turned to me, this 65-year-old woman being berated by a woman half my age. But instead of crumbling with shame, I smiled. This moment? I had been waiting for it for years. With steady hands, I waved to a waiter standing by the door. He nodded and turned on the large television screen at the front of the private dining area. Amanda's face went pale. She had no idea what was coming. Before I tell you what happened next, let me take you back 22 years to when my son David first brought Amanda home. He was 28, successful in his engineering career, and absolutely smitten with this beautiful woman he had met at a friend's wedding. Amanda was 26, worked in marketing, and had the kind of polished charm that immediately drew people in. With her perfect blonde hair, designer clothes, and infectious laugh, she seemed like a dream come true. "Mom, this is the one," David whispered to me in the kitchen while Amanda chatted with his father in the living room. The look of pure happiness on my son's face warmed my heart. My husband John and I had raised our only child with so much love, and all we wanted was for him to find someone who would cherish him as much as we did. "She seems lovely," I replied, squeezing his arm. And at the time I meant it. Amanda was attentive, asked all the right questions about our family photos, complimented my cooking, and seemed genuinely interested in our lives. When they left that evening, John remarked, "David's found himself a keeper." 6 months later, they were engaged. The wedding planning began immediately, and that's when I noticed the first subtle shift. Amanda had very specific ideas about what she wanted. The most expensive venue in the city, a designer dress from New York, exotic flowers flown in from South America. Nothing local or simple would do. "Don't you think it's a bit excessive?" I cautiously suggested one day when David mentioned the cost of the ice sculptures she wanted. "Mom, we only get married once," he said defensively. "Amanda deserves her dream wedding." I backed off immediately. The last thing I wanted was to be labeled as the interfering mother-in-law. So I smiled and nodded and wrote checks to help cover costs that were clearly stretching their budget. The wedding was magnificent. I have to admit, like something out of a glossy magazine. But something felt off about the way Amanda barely acknowledged my husband and me in her speech, focusing instead on her own parents and friends. "You looked beautiful today," I told her sincerely at the reception. "Thanks," she replied, barely looking at me. This necklace would have looked better with the original dress I wanted, but I had to compromise somewhere, I guess. I brushed it off. Wedding stress, I thought. Things would settle down once they were married. Then came the news that Amanda was pregnant, just a year after the wedding. I was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a grandmother. I started knitting baby blankets and buying little outfits, dreaming of all the ways I would help and support them with the new baby. "We've decided to convert the guest room into the nursery," Amanda announced when I visited their new house. "So unfortunately, we won't have space for overnight guests anymore." "Oh," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. Their house had 4 bedrooms. "Well, that makes sense. The baby needs space. And Betty," she added, using my first name despite knowing I had hoped she would call me Mom, "we're going to be pretty overwhelmed at first, so maybe wait a couple of weeks after the baby comes before visiting." Again, I nodded and told myself this was reasonable. First-time parents needed space. I didn't want to crowd them. But a couple of weeks turned into a month, and even then, my visits were strictly scheduled and limited to 2 hours. Jake was born, a beautiful baby boy with David's eyes and dimpled chin. My heart expanded with love the first time I held him. "Hey there, little one," I whispered. "Grandma's going to spoil you rotten." "Let's not use Grandma," Amanda interrupted, taking Jake from my arms. "It sounds so old. How about you be Betty to him? Keep things simple." My son said nothing, just gave me an apologetic look. And so began the slow, methodical distancing between me and my grandson. Birthday invitations came with specific time slots for my attendance, always scheduled when other guests had left. Holiday gatherings increasingly happened at Amanda's parents' house, with us invited as an afterthought. Photos I sent to Jake were lost in the mail. Books I purchased disappeared before he could read them. Then came Jake's 8th birthday. I had saved up to buy him the bicycle he'd been talking about for months. "We already got him one," Amanda said when I arrived with my carefully wrapped gift. "From us and my parents. You should have checked with me first." "What should I do with this one, then?" I asked, crestfallen. "Return it," she said with a shrug. "Get him something else, something smaller." That evening, as I was helping clean up while Amanda was busy with other guests, Jake ran up to me. "Grandma?" he whispered excitedly, still using the forbidden term when his mother wasn't listening. "Can I come stay with you sometime? Like Tommy does with his grandma?" My heart leapt at the request. "Of course, sweetheart. Anytime." But when I mentioned it to David and Amanda later, suggesting Jake might enjoy a weekend at my house during summer break, Amanda's expression hardened. "Actually, Betty, we've been meaning to talk to you about something," she said, glancing at David. "We're concerned about some of your behaviors lately. The forgetfulness, the emotional outbursts." "What outbursts?" I asked, genuinely confused. "See, David? This is what I mean. She doesn't even remember." Amanda turned to me with fake concern. "Betty, last month at the family picnic, you got angry and yelled at Jake when he wouldn't sit next to you." My mother was very concerned. "That never happened," I said, feeling cold all over. "I would never yell at Jake. This is exactly why we don't think overnight visits are a good idea right now," she continued smoothly. "Maybe once you've seen someone about these memory issues." I looked at my son, waiting for him to defend me, to say that he'd been at that picnic too and knew nothing like that had occurred. But he just stared at his hands and murmured, "We're just concerned, Mom." That night, driving home in tears, I realized with gut-wrenching clarity what was happening. Amanda wasn't just keeping me at arm's length. She was actively turning my family against me, painting me as unstable and unfit to be around my own grandson. And the worst part? My son was believing her. Despite Amanda's orchestrated campaign against me, I refused to give up on my relationship with Jake. I sent cards for every holiday, called on his birthday even when my calls went to voicemail, and showed up at his school events whenever I learned about them, usually through friends whose grandchildren attended the same school. "Grandma!" Jake would exclaim happily when he spotted me in the audience at his 4th grade play or middle school band concert. The genuine joy in his eyes gave me the strength to endure Amanda's cold stares and David's awkward greetings. My son had become almost a stranger to me. Our once close relationship had deteriorated to obligatory phone calls on holidays and the occasional stilted family dinner. Under Amanda's constant influence, David had adopted her narrative that I was becoming difficult and unreliable. The more I tried to defend myself, the more it seemed to confirm their perception that I was emotionally unstable. Then came my 60th birthday. My best friend Judy insisted on throwing me a small party and invited David, Amanda, and 12-year-old Jake, along with a few other close friends. "They probably won't come," I warned Judy as she prepared the invitations. "Let's see," she said optimistically. To my surprise, they accepted. Hope fluttered in my chest. Maybe this would be a turning point. The party was lovely. Simple food, warm conversation, no pressure. Jake gave me a handmade card that I treasured. Even David seemed relaxed, sharing stories about work and laughing at Judy's jokes. Amanda was quieter than usual, observing everything with those calculating eyes of hers. When it came time for cake, Judy brought out a beautiful chocolate creation with candles blazing. As everyone sang happy birthday, I felt a moment of pure happiness. Maybe things could get better. Maybe we could be a family again. Then, as I leaned forward to blow out the candles, I felt a sharp nudge against my chair. I lost my balance and pitched forward, my face landing directly in the center of the cake. There was a shocked silence, followed by Amanda's theatrical gasp. "Oh my God, Betty, are you okay?" she exclaimed, rushing forward with a napkin but not actually helping me up. David, I think she lost her balance again. Remember what happened at Christmas? Nothing had happened at Christmas. I knew it. And deep down, David must have known it too. But as my friends helped me clean frosting from my face and hair, I caught my son looking at me with concern that bordered on pity. Amanda had staged the perfect incident to reinforce her narrative, and in front of witnesses too. Later that week, I overheard something that broke my heart. I had stopped by their house to drop off some thank you notes for birthday gifts, using the spare key David had given me years ago. I called out when I entered, but no one answered. As I set the notes on the kitchen counter, I heard voices from the family room. Amanda and Jake. Your grandmother has always been jealous of me, Amanda was saying in a low, confidential tone. Ever since your father and I got married. Did you know she tried to convince him not to marry me? Really? Jake sounded uncertain. Oh, yes. She even told people I was only after your father's money. Can you imagine? As if I needed his money when my family had plenty of their own. The lie stunned me. I had never said any such thing. In fact, I had defended Amanda when one of my friends suggested she might be materialistic. She made your grandfather's life miserable too, Amanda continued, always controlling him, spending his money. That's why he was so unhappy before he died. John had died of heart failure when Jake was just 4. He had been the love of my life for 40 years. We had been blissfully happy until the very end. This cruel rewriting of our history was too much. I stepped into the doorway. That's not true, Amanda, I said quietly. She jumped, then quickly composed herself. Betty, I didn't hear you come in. Using your key again without calling first? Jake looked between us, confused and uncomfortable. I did call out, I said, then turned to Jake. Sweetheart, your grandfather loved me very much, and I loved him. We had a wonderful marriage, and I never said anything against your mother to anyone. See what I mean? Amanda said to Jake, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. These memory issues. She doesn't remember the things she said. It's getting worse. Then to me, with steel in her voice, I think it's time we got that key back, don't you? After that incident, the isolation grew worse. David asked for my house key back, citing concerns for my well-being and suggesting I might wander over unannounced if I became confused. Family gatherings became even rarer. I was not invited to Thanksgiving that year, with Amanda claiming they were keeping it small, though I later saw Facebook photos showing a house full of her family members. The depression that settled over me was heavy and dark. I spent days alone in my house, looking at old photos, wondering where I had gone wrong. Had I been too welcoming? Not welcoming enough? Should I have spoken up earlier about Amanda's manipulations? Would David have listened? Judy became my lifeline during this time. She brought groceries when I couldn't summon the energy to shop, dragged me out for walks and coffee, and most importantly, helped me see that what was happening wasn't my fault. This is textbook emotional abuse, Betty, she said one afternoon as we sat in my garden. Amanda is isolating you and gaslighting you, making you question your own reality. And she's using your love for David and Jake as leverage. But why? I asked. The question that had haunted me for years. What did I ever do to her? Some people are just like that, Judy said grimly. They need complete control. Anyone who has an independent relationship with their spouse or child is a threat. Armed with this new perspective, I made one last attempt to reach David. I invited him to lunch, just the two of us. To my surprise, he accepted. The restaurant was neutral territory, a place we had both always enjoyed. For the first few minutes, we made small talk about the weather, his job, mundane things. Then I took a deep breath and dove in. David, I miss you. I miss Jake. I miss being part of your lives. He fidgeted with his napkin. Mom, we're just busy. Amanda has her hands full with Jake's activities, and work has been crazy for me. It's more than that, I said gently. Over the years, Amanda has been systematically cutting me out of your lives. She's told lies about me, created situations to make me look bad, and convinced you that I'm unstable. His face hardened. See, This is exactly what she warned me about. You've always been jealous of Amanda. You've never given her a chance. That's not true, and you know it, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I welcomed her with open arms. I helped pay for your wedding. I've bent over backwards to accommodate her rules about when and how I can see Jake. Mom, I think you should talk to someone. A therapist. Amanda found some resources on elderly paranoia. I'm not paranoid, David. And I'm only 65. Not exactly elderly. I took another deep breath. Listen to me. I think Amanda has been manipulating all of us for years. I'm worried about you and Jake. He stood up abruptly. I'm not going to sit here and listen to you attack my wife. This lunch was a mistake. As he walked out, leaving me sitting alone with our uneaten meals, I realized that frontal confrontation wasn't going to work. Amanda's hold on him was too strong. I needed another approach. That evening, as I was checking my email, I noticed a message from Jake's school about the honor roll. My grandson's name was on it. Despite everything, I felt a surge of pride. On impulse, I called the school the next day and asked about establishing a college fund for Jake. The administrative staff confirmed that John and I had set one up years ago, with regular deposits coming from our account. They were happy to send me the latest statement. When it arrived, I stared at it in shock. According to my records, there should have been over $40,000 in the account. The statement showed less than $10,000. Somehow, over $30,000 had been withdrawn over the past few years. Each withdrawal required signatures from both account managers, and one of them was supposedly me. But I had never authorized any withdrawals. Someone had been forging my signature to steal from my grandson's future. And I had a pretty good idea who that someone was. The discovery of the missing college fund money left me reeling. Not only had Amanda been poisoning my relationship with my family, but she had also been stealing from her own son. The betrayal felt like a physical blow. I spent several sleepless nights debating what to do. If I confronted Amanda directly, she would deny everything and use it as further evidence of my mental instability. If I went to David, he would likely take her side again. I could go to the police, but without proof that it was Amanda who forged my signature, it would be my word against hers. As I was mulling over my options one morning, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Grandma? It's Jake. My heart leapt at the sound of my grandson's voice. He was 16 now, and his voice had deepened, but I would know it anywhere. Jake! Sweetheart, it's wonderful to hear from you. Is everything okay? Yeah, everything's fine, he said, though something in his tone suggested otherwise. I was wondering if maybe we could meet up sometime. Just to talk. Trying to contain my excitement, I suggested lunch that weekend. To my surprise, he agreed immediately. We met at a small cafe near his high school. Jake had grown so much since I'd last seen him at a school concert months earlier. He was taller than his father now, with the same kind eyes but a seriousness beyond his years. I got your card for my debate team win, he said after we ordered. Mom doesn't know. She usually checks the mail first. I nodded, unsurprised. I'm glad you got it. I'm so proud of you, Jake. That's the thing, Grandma, he said, leaning forward. You always remember stuff like that. You always care. But Mom, he hesitated. Mom keeps telling me that you're losing it, that you make up stories and get confused about the past. And what do you think? I asked carefully. He studied me. I think she's lying. I've thought so for a while. The things she says about you don't match what I remember, and Dad just goes along with whatever she says. Relief and gratitude washed over me. My grandson hadn't been completely taken in by Amanda's lies. There's more, he continued. Last week I overheard Mom on the phone with someone. She was laughing about how she'd managed the old lady and kept her away all these years. She was talking about you, Grandma. We talked for nearly 2 hours. Jake shared memories from when he was younger, times when Amanda had intercepted gifts from me, explained away my absences from family events, or spoken badly about me when she thought he wasn't listening. I shared some of my experiences too, careful not to overwhelm him or speak too harshly about his mother. I want to see you more, Jake declared as we finished our lunch. I'm old enough now to make my own decisions. We began meeting regularly after that. Sometimes for lunch, sometimes just for ice cream or a walk in the park. Jake was hungry for stories about his father's childhood, about his grandfather, about our family history. I soaked up details about his life, his interest in debate and history, his dream of studying law, his first girlfriend. About a month into our secret meetings, the inevitable happened. Amanda found out. Jake called me, his voice tense. Mom went through my phone. She saw our texts. She freaked out, said I was betraying her by seeing you behind her back. What did your father say? I asked. He took her side. Like always. Jake sounded bitter. But I told them both that I'm 16, not 6. I have a right to know my own grandmother. I was so proud of him in that moment, standing up to the manipulation that had controlled our family for years. But I also worried about the backlash he might face at home. They can't stop me, Jake insisted when I expressed my concern. I'll be 18 soon, and then I can do whatever I want. 2 days later, I received a scathing email from Amanda, accusing me of poisoning Jake against her and threatening legal action if I continued to see him without permission. I forwarded it to Judy, who had a friend who was a family lawyer. She doesn't have a leg to stand on, the lawyer told me after reviewing the email. Jake is 16. Unless you're doing something harmful, which you clearly aren't, she has no grounds to prevent him from seeing you. Bolstered by this knowledge, I continued meeting with Jake, though we were more discreet about our arrangements. During one of our lunches, I cautiously broached the subject of the college fund. Jake, did your parents ever mention a college fund that your grandfather and I set up for you? He looked surprised. Yeah, actually. Mom mentioned it once when I was talking about applying to Stanford. She said there wasn't much in it. Maybe enough for books for a semester or two. I took a deep breath. Jake, there should be over $40,000 in that account. Your grandfather and I started it the day you were born, and we added to it every month until he died. I've continued the contributions ever since. Jake's expression shifted from surprise to confusion to dawning anger. Are you saying someone took that money? I showed him the statement I'd received. Someone has been withdrawing funds using a forged signature. My signature. He stared at the paper, then at me. You think it was Mom? It wasn't a question. In that moment, I realized Jake had seen more of his mother's true nature than I had given him credit for. I can't prove it, I said carefully. But yes, I suspect it was her. Jake was quiet for a long time. What do we do? He finally asked. I'm not sure yet, I admitted. But I'm working on it. As we were leaving the restaurant, a woman approached our table. She was about Amanda's age, with dark hair and a hesitant smile. Excuse me, she said. Are you Betty? David's mother? I nodded, confused. I'm Linda Morgan. I was Amanda's roommate in college. She glanced at Jake. And you must be Jake. You look just like your dad. Jake and I exchanged surprised looks. I hope you don't mind the interruption, Linda continued. I recognized you from photos Amanda used to have. I've been meaning to reach out for years, but she trailed off, seeming unsure how to continue. Would you like to join us for coffee? I offered, curious about this woman from Amanda's past. Over coffee, Linda revealed that she and Amanda had been best friends throughout college, but had a falling out shortly before Amanda met David. She wasn't always like she is now, Linda said, stirring her latte. Or maybe she was, and I just didn't see it clearly. Amanda was always strategic about relationships. She knew how to make people feel special, how to make them depend on her. That sounds familiar, I murmured. The thing is, I've been carrying this guilt for years, Linda continued. When she started dating David, I should have warned him. After what she did to my brother. Jake leaned forward. What did she do to your brother? Linda hesitated, looking between us. My brother Tom dated Amanda for about 6 months before she met David. She systematically isolated him from friends and family, claiming they were toxic influences. Then she convinced him to invest in a business venture, all his savings, about $20,000. The business was fake. She took the money and broke up with him a week later. He was devastated, financially and emotionally. My blood ran cold. The pattern was so familiar. Did you ever confront her? I asked. I tried. She denied everything, said Tom was unstable and had given her the money as a gift. She was so convincing that even I started to doubt what I knew. Linda looked down at her coffee. By the time I sorted through all her lies, she was already engaged to David. I tried to reach out to him, but Amanda intercepted my calls. Eventually, I gave up. As we continued talking, Linda revealed more about Amanda's past, a history of manipulative relationships, financial schemes, and what Linda called a double life. Even in college, she was seeing multiple guys, telling each one he was the only one. She had different personas for different social circles. It was like she was trying on identities to see which one got her the most benefit. Before we parted, Linda gave me her phone number. If there's anything I can do to help set the record straight, please call me. I should have done this years ago. Driving home, I felt a strange mix of validation and deep sadness. All these years I had questioned myself, wondered if I was somehow at fault for the breakdown of my relationship with David. Now I had confirmation that Amanda's behavior was part of a long-standing pattern, one that predated me entirely. But the most shocking revelation came 2 days later, when Linda called me. "Betty, there's something else you should know," she said without preamble. "Amanda has a boyfriend. Has had one for years, as far as I can tell." "What? Are you sure?" I clutched the phone tighter. "Positive. His name is Ryan Cooper. They were together before she met David, and from what I've heard through mutual acquaintances, they never really ended things. I've seen them together as recently as last year, at a restaurant downtown." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Amanda's frequent girls' trips, her late nights at work events, her insistence on separate vacations from David. "Does David know?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I doubt it. Amanda's very careful. But Betty." Linda paused. "I think this goes beyond an affair. I think they're planning something. When I saw them, they were arguing about money and timing. I heard her say something about after the graduation and taking half. My mind raced. Jake would be graduating from high school in 3 months. Was Amanda planning to leave David as soon as Jake was out of the house? Was she planning to take half of everything in the divorce? Half of what my son had worked his entire adult life to build? "Thank you for telling me, Linda," I said, my resolve hardening. I think it's time Amanda's true nature was exposed. Linda's revelations about Amanda's secret boyfriend and possible plans to leave David after Jake's graduation lit a fire under me. I had spent years being manipulated and gaslit, watching helplessly as my family was torn apart. Now, finally, I had a chance to uncover the truth. Linda and I met again, this time without Jake. Over lunch, she shared everything she could remember about Amanda's past schemes, relationships, and lies. "The pattern is always the same," Linda explained. "She identifies what someone values most, makes herself essential to it, then uses it as leverage to get what she wants. With your son, it was his desire for family stability. With Jake, it's his relationship with his father. And with me, it was my relationship with both of them," I added sadly. "Exactly. Classic isolation tactics. Cut off the target from their support system, then rewrite the narrative." I knew I needed more than just Linda's word if I was going to have any hope of convincing David or protecting Jake. On Judy's recommendation, I contacted a private investigator named Sarah Daniels. "I don't normally take family drama cases," Sarah told me bluntly when we first met at her small office downtown. "They tend to get messy." "This is beyond drama," I assured her. "There's financial fraud, identity theft, and possibly worse. I need evidence, not rumors." Sarah studied me, then nodded. "All right, tell me everything." I laid out the whole story. Amanda's systematic campaign against me, the missing college fund money, Linda's information about the secret boyfriend, all of it. Sarah took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "This won't be cheap," she warned when I finished. And there's no guarantee I'll find anything concrete. I understand, but I have to try. For my son and grandson. For the next month, Sarah investigated Amanda's activities. She tracked financial records, followed Amanda discreetly, and dug into her past. Each week, Sarah would share her findings with me, building a disturbing picture of Amanda's double life. She's definitely still seeing Ryan Cooper, Sarah confirmed, showing me surveillance photos of Amanda meeting a handsome man in his 40s at a hotel. They're careful, but not careful enough. The financial trail was even more damning. Sarah discovered that Amanda had opened multiple credit cards in David's name, running up significant debt. She had also been transferring small amounts from their joint accounts to a separate account in her name only, small enough not to raise immediate suspicion, but adding up to over $60,000 over the years. And here's where it gets interesting, Sarah said during one of our meetings. That money isn't just sitting in her account. She's been investing it with Ryan Cooper's financial firm. He's been helping her hide and grow these funds for years. Does David know about any of this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Sarah shook her head. Based on the household financial patterns I've observed, he handles the major bills, but she manages the day-to-day expenses and most of the paperwork. It would be easy for her to conceal these activities from him. And the college fund withdrawals? I'm still working on that. The withdrawals were made in cash, which makes them harder to trace. But I've got some leads. As Sarah continued her investigation, I reached out to other family members with small pieces of the truth. I started with my sister Carol, who had always been skeptical of Amanda but had kept her distance out of respect for me. I knew something was off about that woman, Carol declared after I shared some of what I had learned. The way she monopolized David at family gatherings, how she always had an excuse for why you couldn't see Jake more often. Did she ever say anything specific about me to you? I asked. Carol hesitated. She implied several times that you were becoming forgetful, maybe even showing early signs of dementia. When I said you seemed perfectly fine to me, she gave me this pitying look and said something about how good you were at covering it up in short interactions. Similar conversations with other family members revealed that Amanda had been systematically spreading doubts about my mental health for years. She had told my brother that I was becoming paranoid. She had suggested to cousins that my grief over John's death had affected my grip on reality. Each person had been fed a slightly different story, all designed to make them question my reliability and mental state. With Sarah's investigation progressing and family members starting to see through Amanda's lies, I decided it was time to have an honest conversation with David. I invited him to dinner at my house, hoping the familiar surroundings might help him be more receptive. To my surprise, he accepted. He arrived looking tired, with new lines around his eyes that hadn't been there a few months earlier. Thanks for coming, I said as I served the pot roast that had always been his favorite. Jake insisted, he admitted. Not quite meeting my eyes. He said I owed it to you to at least hear you out. My heart swelled with gratitude for my grandson's loyalty. Jake is a remarkable young man. You've done a good job with him. David nodded, a small smile briefly lighting his face. He's the best thing in my life. We ate in silence for a few minutes before I carefully broached the subject. David, there are some things you need to know about Amanda. Difficult things that may be hard to hear. His expression immediately closed off. Mom, if you invited me here to attack my wife again, I invited you here because I love you, I interrupted firmly. And because I can't stand by and watch you be deceived anymore. I told him everything. The missing college fund money, the credit cards in his name, the secret bank account, the boyfriend. I didn't mention Sarah or show him the evidence yet, wanting to gauge his initial reaction first. As I spoke, David's face went through a series of emotions: disbelief, anger, hurt, and finally, a flicker of doubt. That's impossible, he said when I finished. But his voice lacked conviction. Amanda wouldn't do those things. She couldn't hide something like that for 20 years. But what if she has? I asked gently. Haven't there been signs? Unexplained absences, financial discrepancies, stories that didn't quite add up? He stared at his plate, pushing food around with his fork. There have been some unusual credit card statements lately. When I asked about them, she said they were billing errors that she'd take care of. He looked up at me. But that doesn't mean she's having an affair or stealing money. I have evidence, David. Concrete evidence. I didn't want to overwhelm you with it tonight. But when you're ready to see it, I'll show you everything. He stood up abruptly. I need to go. I need to think. I walked him to the door, fighting the urge to push harder. I love you, son. Whatever happens, remember that. He nodded stiffly and left. I had no idea if I'd gotten through to him or just pushed him further away. 2 days later, Sarah called with a breakthrough. I've confirmed that Amanda forged your signature on the college fund withdrawals, she said triumphantly. I found the bank employee who processed several of the transactions. He remembered Amanda clearly because she flirted with him each time. He's willing to make a statement. That's incredible, I breathed. What about her plans after Jake's graduation? Based on emails I've accessed and conversations I've recorded, she and Ryan are planning to leave the country, Costa Rica specifically. She's been transferring funds to a bank there for months. And David? From what I can tell, she plans to file for divorce immediately after Jake's graduation. The timing isn't random. In 3 months, she and David will have been married for 20 years. In your state, that's a threshold for higher spousal support in long-term marriages. The calculated coldness of it all stunned me. Amanda had been planning this for years, positioning herself to extract maximum financial benefit while continuing her relationship with Ryan on the side. There's more, Sarah continued. I've been in touch with Ryan Cooper's ex-wife. Apparently, this isn't the first time he and Amanda have run this scheme. They targeted another wealthy family about 25 years ago, before Amanda met David. The husband committed suicide after discovering the extent of the deception. Horror washed over me. This went beyond manipulation or greed. This was predatory behavior that had already led to tragedy once before. I couldn't let history repeat itself with my son. As Jake's graduation approached, I had accumulated a substantial file of evidence. Financial records showing Amanda's fraud, surveillance photos documenting her affair, statements from people she had deceived in the past, and testimonies from family members about her campaign to discredit me. Jake called me one evening, excitement in his voice. Grandma, we're having a big dinner after graduation at the Oak Tree restaurant. Mom's inviting the whole family. Even her parents are flying in from Arizona. She says you're invited too. Really? I couldn't hide my surprise. Amanda had been keeping me away from family gatherings for years. That's unexpected. Yeah, well, I might have insisted, Jake admitted. I told her it was important to me to have you there. A thought occurred to me. Jake, did your mother seem particularly pleased about including me? Maybe even suggested it herself once you brought it up. Now that you mention it, yeah, she was weirdly agreeable about it. Usually she makes excuses about why you can't come. A chill ran down my spine. Amanda wasn't including me out of a sudden change of heart. She was planning something, likely a public humiliation to discredit me before I could expose her. Two could play at that game. Tell your mother I'd be delighted to attend, I said, an idea forming in my mind. And Jake, don't mention that we've talked about this. After hanging up, I called Sarah. I need your help with one more thing, I said, explaining my suspicions about the graduation dinner. If Amanda is planning to publicly humiliate me, I want to be prepared. Sounds like we need to set up a counteroffensive, Sarah agreed. What did you have in mind? I outlined my plan. It would require careful preparation and perfect timing, but if it worked, Amanda's facade would crumble once and for all. Next, I contacted the manager of the Oak Tree restaurant. Fortunately, he remembered me from the days when John and I had been regular customers. Mrs. Anderson, it's been too long. Marcus greeted me warmly when I visited the restaurant the next day. Marcus, I need a favor, I said after explaining the situation in broad terms. It's for my grandson's graduation celebration. I want it to be perfect, but I also need to ensure some family truths come to light. Marcus was discreet and professional. We have audio-visual equipment for business presentations and special announcements. Would that help? That would be perfect, I replied, relief washing over me. I'll need to coordinate with your staff on the timing. Over the next few weeks, I finalized my preparations. Sarah compiled the most damning evidence into a concise video presentation. Linda agreed to attend the dinner as my guest, ready to corroborate the historical patterns of Amanda's behavior. I even arranged for Ryan Cooper to receive an invitation through a mutual connection. His presence would be the final piece of the puzzle. The night before the graduation, I knelt beside my bed in prayer for the first time since John died. Please give me strength, I whispered into the darkness. Not for vengeance, but for truth. For my family, I slept fitfully, dreaming of confrontations and reconciliations. When morning came, I felt a strange calm. After 20 years of manipulation and lies, the truth was finally going to have its day. The morning of Jake's high school graduation dawned bright and clear. As I dressed in a simple blue suit that John had always loved, I thought about the gravity of what I was about to do. Exposing Amanda would irrevocably change our family dynamics. David might never forgive me if I was wrong, or even if I was right, but handled it poorly. I called Judy, needing her level-headed perspective. Am I doing the right thing? I asked after explaining my preparations for the dinner. Sometimes I worry I've become so focused on proving Amanda's deception that I've lost sight of what really matters. What really matters is the truth, Betty, Judy replied firmly. And protecting your son and grandson from someone who's been systematically manipulating and defrauding them. That's not revenge, that's love. But exposing her so publicly, would you rather do it privately, where she can twist your words and continue to paint you as unstable? You've tried that approach for years. Sometimes the truth needs witnesses. She was right. I'd spent years trying to address the situation discreetly, only to have my concerns dismissed or used against me. Public exposure wasn't my first choice, it was my last resort. Still, I needed to consider the moral implications carefully. Was I acting out of wounded pride, bitter resentment, or genuine concern for my family? After honest soul-searching, I believed my motives were pure. Amanda's deception wasn't just hurting me, it was endangering David's financial security and emotional well-being. And it had already stolen from Jake's future. If I remained silent knowing what I now knew, I would be complicit in her continued exploitation of my family. With renewed resolve, I headed to the high school auditorium for the graduation ceremony. I arrived early, finding a seat with a good view of the stage. Scanning the growing crowd, I spotted David and Amanda several rows ahead. She was impeccably dressed, as always, her blonde hair arranged in elegant waves, laughing and chatting with the parents around her as if she didn't have a care in the world. David sat beside her, smiling politely but with a distracted look in his eyes. Had our conversation planted seeds of doubt? The ceremony was moving. When Jake's name was called and he crossed the stage to receive his diploma, I felt a surge of pride so intense it brought tears to my eyes. Despite everything, my grandson had grown into a remarkable young man. Intelligent, compassionate, and strong enough to think for himself. After the ceremony, families gathered outside for photos and congratulations. I kept my distance, waiting for Jake to find me. "Grandma!" he called, weaving through the crowd in his blue cap and gown. He wrapped me in a tight hug. "You made it!" "I wouldn't have missed it for the world," I said, holding him close. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." "Thanks for coming, Mom," David said stiffly, approaching with Amanda at his side. Her smile was brittle as she air-kissed my cheek. "Betty! How lovely to see you!" she exclaimed with artificial warmth. "I'm so glad you could join us for Jake's special day." "I wouldn't have missed it," I repeated, meeting her gaze steadily. "Family is everything to me." Something flickered in her eyes. Wariness, perhaps, or calculation. She knew I wasn't as isolated or powerless as I had once been. Jake's insistence on maintaining a relationship with me had created a crack in her carefully constructed narrative. "We should head to the restaurant," Amanda announced, checking her watch. I've planned something special for the celebration. So have I murmured, too quietly for her to hear. The Oak Tree restaurant was one of the finest in town, with private dining rooms for special occasions. Amanda had reserved the largest one, with a long table set for 20 guests. Family members and close friends were already arriving when our small group entered. Marcus caught my eye as we were being seated and gave me a subtle nod. Everything was in place. I had been deliberately positioned at the far end of the table from Jake, David, and Amanda, a seating arrangement I was sure Amanda had orchestrated to minimize my participation. Linda was seated beside me, having arrived a few minutes earlier. Ryan Cooper was 3 seats away, looking uncomfortable but present as planned. As appetizers were served, Amanda stood and tapped her glass for attention. "I'd like to propose a toast to our graduate," she announced, beaming at Jake. "Your father and I couldn't be prouder of the young man you've become. Your future is limitless, and we can't wait to see where life takes you next." Glasses were raised around the table. I sipped my water, watching Amanda closely. This performance as the devoted mother was just the beginning. I knew. The real show would come later, when she made her move against me. Throughout the meal, I engaged in pleasant conversation with those around me, including Ryan Cooper. He was charming and smooth, clearly practiced at making people feel at ease. If I hadn't known what Sarah had discovered about him, I might have been taken in myself. "So you work in financial management?" I asked innocently. "That's right," he replied. "Primarily investment portfolio management for select clients." "Fascinating. Do you know my daughter-in-law? I believe she has some investment experience as well." He froze momentarily before recovering. "I don't believe we've met before today." Amanda mentioned she had family in the financial sector, which is probably why I was included in this gathering. The lie was smooth, but his eyes darted briefly toward Amanda, who was watching our interaction with barely concealed anxiety. As dessert was being served, Amanda stood once again, this time moving to stand directly behind my chair. The positioning wasn't accidental. She wanted everyone's eyes on both of us. "Before we finish this wonderful celebration," she began, her voice carrying across the room, "I'd like to say something about family, about honesty and loyalty." "Here it comes," I thought, steeling myself. "Some of you know that we've had some challenges with Betty over the years," Amanda continued, placing her hand on my shoulder in a gesture that appeared supportive but felt invasive. Her memory issues, her confusion about events, her difficulty accepting the passage of time. Murmurs rippled around the table. I remained perfectly still, my eyes fixed on David, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable. "I've tried to be patient, to be understanding," Amanda said, her voice dripping with false compassion. "But recently, her behavior has become concerning. She's been spreading hurtful lies about me to Jake. She's been making accusations that are frankly disturbing." She turned to face me directly now, her mask of concern slipping to reveal the cold calculation beneath. "Betty, we all care about you, but this has to stop. The paranoia, the fabricated stories, the attempts to turn my son against me. It's not just hurtful. It's a sign that you need professional help." The room had fallen completely silent. All eyes were on me, waiting for my reaction. Tears, denial, confusion. Amanda was counting on me to appear exactly as she had portrayed me, unstable, confused, possibly even unhinged in my response. Instead, I smiled. The expression clearly threw her. She had expected hurt, anger, defensiveness, not this calm, almost pleased reaction. "You're absolutely right, Amanda," I said, my voice steady and clear. "This does have to stop. The lies, the manipulation, the fraud, all of it ends today." Confusion flashed across her face. "I'm afraid I don't understand what you mean," she said, attempting to maintain her concerned facade. I stood up slowly, turning to face her. "I think you understand perfectly. But in case there's any confusion, let me clarify." I signaled to Marcus, who nodded to a waiter stationed by the door. The lights dimmed slightly, and a large screen descended from the ceiling at the front of the room. "What is this?" Amanda demanded, her composure beginning to crack. "This," I said simply, "is the truth." The restaurant fell silent as all eyes turned to the screen. Amanda's face had drained of color, but she quickly attempted to regain control of the situation. "I'm sorry, everyone," she said with a forced laugh. "My mother-in-law seems to have arranged some kind of presentation. Betty, this is Jake's celebration. Whatever point you're trying to make can wait for another time." "No, Amanda," I replied calmly. "It's waited far too long already." I nodded to Marcus, who pressed a button on a remote. The screen illuminated with a title slide, "The Truth About Amanda Anderson." "This is ridiculous," Amanda hissed, turning to David. "Are you going to let her hijack our son's graduation dinner with whatever crazy accusations she's cooked up?" David hesitated, looking between Amanda and me. Before he could respond, Jake spoke up. "I want to see it, Mom," he said firmly. "Grandma wouldn't do this without good reason." Amanda's mouth opened and closed, clearly caught off guard by Jake's support. With no graceful way to object further, she sank back into her chair, her eyes darting nervously to Ryan Cooper, who was shifting uncomfortably in his seat. The presentation began with financial records, clear documentation of the forged signatures on Jake's college fund withdrawals, with expert analysis confirming the forgery. Next came bank statements, showing the systematic transfers from David and Amanda's joint accounts to her private account, followed by investment records linking that account to Ryan Cooper's firm. Gasps and murmurs filled the room as the evidence mounted. Amanda's parents exchanged horrified glances. David stared at the screen, his expression hardening with each new revelation. "This is all fabricated," Amanda protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Anyone can create fake documents these days." "These aren't fake, Amanda," I replied, "and I think you know that." The presentation continued with surveillance photos showing Amanda and Ryan together, entering hotels, having intimate dinners, embracing in ways that couldn't be explained away as professional or friendly. "That's Ryan Cooper," I explained to the room, pointing to the man in the photos. "Amanda's boyfriend of over 20 years. A relationship that predates and spans her entire marriage to my son." All eyes turned to Ryan, who had half risen from his chair. "I should go," he muttered. "Please stay," I said firmly. "You're an important part of this story." The next section of the presentation was perhaps the most damning. A recorded phone conversation between Amanda and Ryan, discussing their plans to leave the country after Jake's graduation. "Once the divorce is filed, we'll have to move quickly," Amanda's voice said clearly from the speakers. "I'll get at least half of everything, plus alimony, since we've hit the 20-year mark. David doesn't suspect a thing." Ryan's response was equally incriminating. "Just like we planned from the beginning. Your longest con yet, babe." Shocked silence filled the room. Amanda's face had gone from pale to mottled red. She lunged toward the equipment, but a waiter smoothly stepped between her and the controls. "Turn it off," she shouted. "These are lies, manipulated recordings." "The truth hurts, doesn't it, Amanda?" I said quietly. "Almost as much as 20 years of your lies have hurt my family." The final segment of the presentation featured testimonials. Linda describing Amanda's history of manipulation and fraud, the bank teller confirming the forged withdrawals, Ryan's ex-wife recounting their previous schemes, and family members sharing how Amanda had systematically turned them against me with false stories about my mental state. When the screen finally went dark, the silence in the room was deafening. All eyes were on Amanda, waiting for her response. For a moment, she seemed frozen, trapped in the glare of exposed truth. Then, like a cornered animal, she attacked. "You bitter old woman," she spat, advancing toward me. "You couldn't stand that David chose me, that he loved me more than you. You've been trying to come between us from day one, and when that didn't work, you resorted to this elaborate frame job." She turned to David, her expression suddenly vulnerable and pleading. "David, honey, you can't believe any of this. She's obviously manipulated these records, paid people to lie. You know how resourceful she can be when she's determined." David stood slowly, his face a mask of controlled fury. Stop it, Amanda. Just stop. What? She blinked, unused to this tone from her typically compliant husband. I checked the accounts, he said, his voice tight with emotion. After Mom told me about her suspicions, I did some investigating of my own. The money transfers, the credit cards in my name, they're real. I just couldn't bring myself to believe you'd been lying to me for our entire marriage. Amanda's facade cracked further. She turned to Jake, desperate for an ally. Jake, sweetheart, you know how much I love you and your father. You can't possibly believe these horrible accusations. Jake looked at her with sadness rather than anger. I found the letters, Mom. The ones from Grandma that you intercepted. They were in your desk drawer, dozens of them. Birthday cards, Christmas cards, notes of encouragement for my games and school events, all unopened. Amanda's expression contorted with rage. She spun toward me again. This is all your fault. You've turned my own family against me. No, Amanda, I replied calmly. You did that yourself, with every lie, every manipulation, every act of deception. I'm just bringing the truth to light. In a last, desperate move, Amanda lunged toward the door. Ryan, we're leaving. Now. But Ryan Cooper was already backing away, distancing himself from the sinking ship. I think I should go, he said, avoiding her eyes. Alone. You coward, she shrieked. After everything we planned. The final nail in the coffin, confirmation from her own lips of their conspiracy. The room erupted in shocked exclamations and disgusted murmurs. Amanda stood alone in the center of the room, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Her eyes darted frantically, searching for an escape route, a sympathetic face, any lifeline at all. Finding none, she turned back to me with pure hatred in her eyes. You think you've won, she hissed. But you've destroyed your son's life. Was your revenge worth it? This was never about revenge, Amanda, I said softly. It was about truth, about justice, about protecting my family from someone who saw them only as pawns in her game. Amanda's face went slack. The fight seemed to drain out of her all at once. Her legs buckled, and before anyone could reach her, she collapsed to the floor in a dead faint. The room erupted in chaos. Someone called for water. Another person suggested an ambulance. I remained where I stood, watching as the elaborate facade Amanda had maintained for 20 years finally, and completely shattered. David knelt beside his unconscious wife, his face a complex mixture of emotions: betrayal, grief, anger, perhaps even a flicker of lingering concern. Jake moved to his father's side, placing a supportive hand on his shoulder. Their eyes met in silent understanding. Whatever came next, they would face it together. As Amanda began to stir, moaning slightly as she regained consciousness, I knew that the hardest part was yet to come. Exposing the truth was only the beginning. Now, my son and grandson would need to rebuild their lives without the woman who had been central to their existence, however toxic her presence had been. But looking at them together, united in this moment of painful truth, I felt the first stirrings of hope. The healing could finally begin. In the days following what our family came to call the Revelation Dinner, a strange calm settled over us. The initial shock and chaos had given way to a quieter, more measured response. Amanda had been taken home by her stunned parents, who seemed as blindsided by her deception as everyone else. Ryan Cooper had disappeared from the restaurant during the commotion and, according to Sarah's sources, had quickly left town. David and Jake moved temporarily into my house, needing space away from the home they had shared with Amanda. Those first few nights were filled with long, difficult conversations as my son processed 20 years of lies and manipulation. I should have seen it, David said repeatedly, his voice heavy with self-recrimination. There were signs. So many signs that I ignored or explained away. Manipulators like Amanda are experts at making you doubt your own perceptions, I reminded him gently. Don't blame yourself for being deceived by someone who made deception her life's work. One evening, about a week after the confrontation, David and I sat on my back porch watching the sunset, much as we had done when he was a boy working through life's smaller disappointments. I keep thinking about all the times I took her side against you, he said quietly. All the family gatherings you missed, the holidays we spent apart, the years you lost with Jake. I let her come between us, and I can never give you back that time. I reached over and took his hand. We have now. We have tomorrow. That's what matters. How can you forgive me so easily? He asked, his voice breaking. Because I love you, I said simply, and because holding on to hurt doesn't heal it. Besides, I've had my own journey to forgiveness. Forgiving myself for not finding a way to reach you sooner. For letting so many years pass before taking decisive action. David squeezed my hand. You did what you had to do, when you could do it. I understand that now. The legal aftermath was complex, and sometimes painful. Amanda, once she realized the extent of the evidence against her, negotiated through her lawyer to avoid criminal charges by agreeing to return the stolen funds and accept a swift, uncontested divorce with minimal financial claims. She's moving to Arizona with her parents. David informed me after one particularly lengthy meeting with his lawyer. Part of the agreement is that she stays at least 500 miles away from all of us. How do you feel about that? I asked. He considered the question carefully. Relieved, mostly. Sad for what could have been if she'd been the person I thought she was, but mostly just free. For Jake, the process of reconciling the mother he thought he knew with the woman revealed at the dinner was particularly challenging. He alternated between anger at her deception and grief for the loss of the maternal relationship he had believed in, however flawed it had been. Do you think she ever really loved me? He asked one afternoon as we sorted through old family photos, reclaiming memories that Amanda had tried to erase. I believe she loved you in the way she was capable of loving, I answered honestly. Some people can only love others as extensions of themselves, not as separate individuals with their own needs and feelings. That's not your fault, and it doesn't diminish your worth in any way. Jake nodded slowly. I'm not sure I'll ever want to see her again. Is that wrong? There's no wrong way to feel, sweetheart. And you don't have to decide everything now. Healing takes time. As spring turned to summer, our family began to rebuild. David threw himself into reclaiming his financial independence, working with a forensic accountant to unravel the web of fraudulent accounts and hidden transfers Amanda had created. To his relief, much of the money she had diverted was recoverable, including a significant portion of Jake's embezzled college fund. Jake, with his future at Stanford now secure, spent his last summer before college reconnecting with extended family members who had been kept at a distance by Amanda's machinations. Cousins, aunts, uncles, people who had been told for years that Jake was too busy for family gatherings, welcomed him with open arms, eager to know the thoughtful young man he had become. As for me, I found unexpected peace in the aftermath of the confrontation. The vindication was sweet, yes, but the real victory was in the restoration of truth and the rebuilding of genuine relationships. Linda became a close friend, our bond forged in the shared experience of recognizing and exposing Amanda's deception. Sarah, the private investigator, and I kept in touch as well, occasionally meeting for coffee and conversations that ranged far beyond our professional connection. David and Jake fully moved back into their house after Amanda collected her belongings. Together, they redecorated, removing the cold, showroom perfection Amanda had insisted upon, and creating instead a warm, lived-in space that reflected their personalities and interests. I was a frequent visitor, no longer required to call ahead or limit my stays to prescribed hours. 1 year after the graduation dinner, we gathered again at the Oak Tree restaurant, not to commemorate the confrontation, but to celebrate Jake's successful first year at college and David's promotion at work. The same private room, but this time filled with easy laughter and genuine connection. After dinner, as we enjoyed coffee and dessert, David tapped his glass for attention. I'd like to make a toast, he said, standing. To my mother, Betty. All eyes turned to me, but this time with warmth and affection rather than suspicion or pity. Mom, a year ago you did something incredibly brave, David continued. You stood up for the truth when it would have been easier to remain silent. You fought for our family when most people would have given up. You showed me what real love looks like. Not possession or control, but wanting the best for someone even when it's difficult. Jake stood next to his father. To Grandma Betty, who taught me that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. To Betty, the table chorused, raising their glasses. Later that evening, as I prepared to leave, Jake pulled me aside. I applied for an ethics and justice scholarship for next year, he told me. I wrote about what happened with Mom and what I learned from you about standing up for truth. I got it. Full funding for my sophomore year. Pride and love welled up in me. Jake, that's wonderful. Your grandfather would have been so proud of the man you're becoming. He hugged me tightly. I wish I had known him better. You have more of him in you than you realize, I said. His integrity, his kindness, his strength, those things live on. Driving home that night, I reflected on the journey of the past 20 years. The pain and isolation, the struggle to be heard, and finally, the triumph of truth. I thought of Amanda, living now with her parents, perhaps reflecting on the web of deception that had ultimately caught her in its strands. I hoped, for her sake, that she might find a way to build an authentic life, though I harbored no illusions about reconciliation. More than anything, I thought about the lessons life had taught me through this ordeal. That truth, however painful, ultimately liberates. That genuine love means wanting freedom and authenticity for those we care about, not control. That standing up against manipulation and deceit is not just a right, but a responsibility. As I pulled into my driveway, the warm lights of my home beckoning me inside, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Not just for the restoration of my family, but for the strength I had found within myself. Strength I hadn't known I possessed until circumstances demanded it. Sometimes, the greatest gift we can give ourselves, and those we love, is the courage to expose deception, however difficult or uncomfortable that process might be. The temporary pain of truth is always preferable to the permanent damage of lies. This, perhaps, was the most important lesson of all. One that I would carry with me for the rest of my days. A hard-won wisdom that made every tear, every moment of doubt, every year of isolation worth the cost. Have you ever had to stand up against someone who was manipulating people you love? It's one of the hardest things to do, especially when the manipulator has spent years painting you as the villain. If my story resonated with you, please leave a comment sharing your experience. Don't forget to like this video if it moved you. Subscribe to hear more stories of triumph over adversity, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their struggle against gaslighting and manipulation. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, it's never too late for truth to prevail.